In the vast, cold emptiness of space, where stars burned dim and hope seemed like a distant memory, the Veilith drifted. Once proud and powerful, their race now clung to survival on crumbling space stations and dying colonies scattered across the galaxy's edge. Their homeworld, Jalor, had been reduced to ash centuries ago, a victim of greed, war, and environmental collapse. The other species in the galaxy had long since abandoned them, seeing the Veilith as relics of a forgotten time, unworthy of aid or even acknowledgement. On one such station, orbiting a dead star, lived Kale. He was young for a Veilith, barely 30 cycles old, and his silver skin shimmered faintly under the weak artificial light. Unlike most of his kind, who spent their days scavenging scraps or arguing over dwindling resources, Kale preferred solitude. His small workshop was filled with tools and half-finished machines, remnants of dreams he refused to let die. While others saw only despair, Kale believed there was still something worth fighting for. One evening, as Kale adjusted the sensors on an old communication array, something unusual caught his attention. A faint signal pulsed through the static, an irregular pattern that didn't match any known language or code. At first, he thought it might be interference from nearby asteroids or a malfunction in the equipment. But when he replayed the recording, he realized it wasn't random noise. It was deliberate, repeating, almost musical. Kale's heart raced. For years, he'd heard stories of ancient signals from beyond the stars, whispers of civilizations lost to time. Most dismissed these tales as myths, but this was real. The signal came from deep within uncharted space, far beyond the reach of any Veilith ship, or so they claimed. Determined to uncover its source, Kale downloaded the data onto a portable drive and hurried to the council chamber. The council was less than thrilled to see him. Elders sat slumped in their chairs, their metallic bodies dulled by age and neglect. They listened impatiently as Kale explained his findings, interrupting him with scoffs and dismissive remarks. "We've heard enough of your fantasies," said Elder Torin, his voice crackling like brittle ice. "Signals mean nothing. Survival is all that matters." But Kale wouldn't give up. "What if it's not just noise?" he argued, holding up the drive. "What if someone, or something, is trying to communicate? This could be our chance to find help, to rebuild what we've lost." His words sparked murmurs among the elders. Some were intrigued. Others remained skeptical. Finally, after much debate, they agreed to send Kale and a small crew aboard the Orion, their last functioning starship. It wasn't out of faith in his theory, but rather because they had little else to lose. Days later, the Orion launched into the void, carrying Kale and 5 others, including Mira, a cautious navigator, and Rin, a grizzled engineer with a penchant for sarcasm. As they left the safety of the station behind, Kale gazed out at the endless expanse of stars. Somewhere out there, hidden among the darkness, lay answers waiting to be found. And though fear gnawed at the edges of his mind, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that this journey would change everything, for better or worse. Little did he know how right he was. The Orion sliced through the cold silence of space, its engines humming softly as it ventured into uncharted territory. Kale stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the navigation screen. The faint signal that had sparked this journey pulsed steadily in the background, guiding them deeper into the unknown. For days, they traveled without incident, but the tension aboard the ship was palpable. Mira, the navigator, double-checked coordinates every hour, her brow furrowed with worry. Rin muttered under his breath about wasted fuel and pointless missions, while the others tried to ignore him. Kale, however, couldn't contain his excitement. Every blip of the signal felt like a step closer to discovery, a chance to prove that the Veilith weren't alone in their suffering. "What if it's another species?" he asked aloud during one quiet moment. "One that survived against all odds, just like we're trying to do." Mira glanced over her shoulder, her expression skeptical. "Or what if it's nothing? Just some old satellite spinning around until it dies." Rin snorted from his seat near the engine controls. Yeah, or maybe it's a trap. You ever think of that, kid? Not everything out here wants to shake hands and sing songs. Kale ignored their doubts. He'd spent years dreaming of something bigger than the crumbling ruins of his people's past, and now, for the first time, he felt close to finding it. The signal grew stronger as they approached an ancient asteroid field, its jagged rocks glinting like broken glass under the dim light of a distant sun. Navigating through the field required precision, and Mira worked tirelessly to plot a safe course. As they emerged on the other side, the crew spotted something strange ahead. A barren moon orbiting a dying red star. Its surface was scarred with craters and streaks of metallic debris, remnants of structures long abandoned. But what caught their attention was a faint glow emanating from the largest crater. It wasn't natural. It was artificial. There, Kale said, pointing to the glow. That's where the signal's coming from. Rin leaned forward, squinting at the readings. Looks like human tech, he grumbled. Figures. Humans always leave their junk everywhere. Human, Kale repeated, his voice tinged with awe. Humans were legendary among the Valeth, not because they were allies, but because they were survivors. Stories of humanity's rise after near extinction were whispered in hushed tones across the galaxy. If this truly was human technology, then perhaps there was more to find, more to learn. They landed carefully near the source of the glow, suiting up in protective gear before stepping onto the moon's desolate surface. The air was thin and icy, and the ground crunched beneath their boots. As they approached the crater, the glow resolved into fragments of machinery half buried in the dirt. Panels etched with unfamiliar symbols lined the walls of the pit, and wires snaked through the rubble like veins. Kale knelt beside one of the panels, brushing away dust to reveal intricate designs. His fingers traced the symbols, marveling at their craftsmanship. Nearby, Mira found a small device still emitting the rhythmic pulses they'd followed. It looked ancient yet functional, its lights flickering weakly. She tapped it gently, and suddenly, a soft melody filled the air, a haunting tune that seemed both alien and familiar. "What is that?" Rin asked, his usual sarcasm replaced by genuine curiosity. Kale didn't answer immediately. Instead, he closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. It wasn't just noise. It carried emotion, sadness, and hope intertwined. For the first time, he understood why humans were so revered. They created beauty even in despair. "Let's keep looking," Kale said finally, standing up. "There's more here. I can feel it." And so, the search continued, each discovery pulling them further into a mystery that promised answers, and perhaps redemption, for a race abandoned by the galaxy. The crew of the Orion spread out across the moon's surface, their flashlights cutting through the eerie darkness. The music from the ancient device still played faintly in the background, its haunting melody blending with the howling winds that swept across the barren landscape. Kale moved cautiously, his boots sinking into the fine gray dust as he explored deeper into the crater. Each step revealed more remnants of what appeared to be a human settlement, a colony lost to time. Mira called out suddenly, her voice echoing off the rocky walls. "Kale, over here." She stood near a jagged opening in the ground, partially hidden by fallen debris. It looked like the entrance to an underground structure. With Rin's help, they cleared away enough rubble to reveal a set of rusted metal stairs descending into the darkness below. "Great," Rin muttered, peering down into the abyss. "What's next?" "Booby traps and skeletons." Ignoring his sarcasm, Kale led the way, his flashlight beam bouncing off damp, moss-covered walls. The air grew colder as they descended, carrying a faint metallic tang. After several minutes, the narrow passage opened into a large chamber filled with strange artifacts. Cracked glass panels lined the walls, displaying faded images of smiling humans alongside tools, books, and other items unfamiliar to the Valeth. Kale approached one of the panels, running his gloved fingers over the etched words written in bold, sweeping letters. Though he couldn't read them, He recognized the effort behind their creation, an attempt to preserve memory and meaning. Nearby, Mira found a recording device embedded in the wall. When she pressed a button, static crackled before giving way to a voice, a woman speaking in a language no one on the crew understood. Her tone was calm yet tinged with sadness, as if she knew her words might never reach anyone. "They were trying to leave something behind," Cale whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "Something more than just machines." Rin picked up a small object lying on the floor, a battered book with brittle pages. He flipped it open carefully, revealing sketches of plants, animals, and landscapes unlike anything they'd seen before. "Looks like they tried to make this place livable," he said gruffly. "Guess it didn't work out." As they explored further, they discovered evidence of terraforming equipment, machines designed to transform the moon's harsh environment into something habitable. Most of the devices were damaged beyond repair, but some still hummed faintly, clinging to life after centuries of neglect. Kel examined one such machine, marveling at its complexity. He realized these humans hadn't given up easily. They had fought hard to survive, even when faced with failure. But it wasn't just the technology that fascinated Kel, it was the art. Murals painted on the walls depicted scenes of hope and resilience. Families gathered around glowing fires, hands reaching toward distant stars, and faces etched with determination. These weren't just records of survival. They were expressions of emotion, of humanity's refusal to let despair consume them. "This is why they're remembered," Cale murmured, turning to face his companions. "Not because they won every battle, but because they kept fighting. They created beauty even when everything else was falling apart." Mira nodded slowly, her usual skepticism softened by the weight of what they'd uncovered. "Do you think we could do the same?" she asked quietly. "Could we rebuild like they did?" Cale didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the chamber, taking in the echoes of Earth that surrounded them. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of possibility, not just for himself, but for all the Vailith. Maybe survival wasn't about clinging to what remained of their past. Maybe it was about learning from those who had come before and daring to dream again. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Cale made a silent promise. Whatever lay ahead, he would honor the legacy of these forgotten humans. Their story wasn't over. It was waiting to be continued. The crew of the Orion had barely finished packing up their findings when the ship's sensors blared to life. A vessel was approaching. Fast. Panic rippled through the group as they scrambled back toward the surface, their flashlights bouncing wildly in the dim underground tunnels. By the time they reached the moon's surface, the newcomer had already entered orbit, its sleek metallic frame glinting ominously against the red glow of the dying star. "It's not Vailith," Mira said, her voice tight with tension as she scanned the readings on her handheld device. "And it's aren't." Cal's heart pounded. For all their curiosity about the galaxy beyond, none of them were prepared for this moment. They huddled together near the Orion, unsure whether to retreat or stand their ground. The unknown ship didn't fire, though. It simply hovered above them, silent and watchful. Then came a crackle over their comms. "Unidentified craft on the surface. Identify yourselves immediately." The voice was calm but firm, speaking in perfect galactic standard, the universal language adopted by most spacefaring species. Mira hesitated, glancing at Cal. He stepped forward, his hands raised slightly in a gesture of peace. "This is Cal of the Vailith," he replied, his voice steady despite the knot of fear in his stomach. "We mean no harm. We're explorers investigating an old signal from this location." There was a pause, long enough to make the crew uneasy. Then the voice responded again, softer this time. "Vailith, you're supposed to be extinct." Before Cal could answer, the ship descended closer, its engines kicking up clouds of dust. A hatch opened, and a figure emerged. A human woman clad in a sleek gray uniform, her helmet visor reflecting the crimson light of the star. She moved cautiously, flanked by two others in similar attire. Their weapons were holstered, but their stances made it clear they were ready for anything. "I'm Captain Elise Vega," the woman said, stopping a few meters away. Her eyes scanned the group, lingering on Kale. "You say you're Valeth?" "Yes," Kale replied, lowering his hand slowly. "We found traces of your people here, an old colony. We thought it was abandoned." Elise's expression softened slightly. "It was. This site hasn't been visited in centuries. How did you even find it?" Kale gestured toward the glowing device still strapped to Mira's belt. "That signal led us here. It played music. We thought it might be important." Elise frowned, stepping closer to examine the device. When she saw the etched symbols and recognized fragments of Earth's ancient languages, her eyes widened. "This is incredible," she murmured. "No one's seen tech like this in generations. Where did you learn about us?" "We didn't," Kale admitted. "But we've heard stories about how humanity rebuilt itself after almost being wiped out. That's why I wanted to come here, to see if there was something we could learn." For a moment, silence hung between them. The humans exchanged wary glances, clearly debating whether to trust these strangers who claimed to admire their resilience. Finally, Elise nodded. "All right, let's start over. My crew and I are scouts sent to investigate unusual energy readings in this sector. Clearly, we weren't the only ones interested." She extended a hand, her gaze steady. "If you're willing, maybe we can help each other understand what happened here, and why." Kale hesitated, then grasped her hand firmly. "We'd like that." As introductions continued, tensions eased slightly. The humans shared basic supplies and offered to escort the Orion back to their cruiser for further discussion. For the first time in years, Kale felt a flicker of hope, not just for himself, but for his entire people. These humans weren't conquerors or scavengers. They were survivors, just like him. And perhaps together, they could rewrite the story of two abandoned races into one of mutual salvation. Inside the human scout cruiser, the atmosphere was tense but hopeful. The Valeth crew sat awkwardly in the ship's briefing room, their silvery skin reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights. Captain Elise Vega stood at the head of the table, her arms crossed as she studied them carefully. Her crew bustled around, analyzing data from the moon, while occasionally glancing at the newcomers with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Kale leaned forward, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "We didn't come here looking for trouble," he began. "We came because we thought there might be answers, something to help us survive. Your people, they inspire us." Elise raised an eyebrow. "Inspire you? Most species see humans as either allies or rivals. You're the first to call us inspiration." "It's true," Kale replied earnestly. "We've heard stories about how humanity rebuilt after near extinction. How you adapted, created, and kept going no matter what. That's something we need now more than ever." Elise sighed, sitting down across from him. She tapped her fingers on the table, thinking. "I won't lie, it's rare to meet a Valeth these days. Most of the galaxy assumes your kind gave up long ago. But seeing you here, it makes me wonder if maybe we underestimated you." Mira spoke up, her tone cautious. "We've been abandoned by everyone else. If anyone can understand being left behind, it's humans, right?" A flicker of sadness passed over Elise's face. "You're not wrong. Humanity knows what it's like to fight for survival when no one believes in you. But rebuilding isn't easy. It takes sacrifice, cooperation, and sometimes facing hard truths." The conversation shifted to practical matters. Elise explained that her mission wasn't just reconnaissance. Her superiors had sent her to assess whether the moon could be salvaged for resources. When Kale mentioned the terraforming equipment they'd found, her interest deepened. Together, they reviewed the scans and schematics, piecing together how the old machines worked and why they'd failed centuries ago. "They were close," Elise said, pointing to a diagram of the system. "But their tech wasn't advanced enough to handle this environment. If we combine our knowledge, maybe we can fix it." Ren, who'd remained quiet until now, snorted. "And what do we get out of this?" More handouts from humans. Elise turned to him sharply. Not handouts. Partnership. We don't have much to spare, but sharing ideas costs nothing. Besides, helping you helps us too. This moon could become valuable again, with the right investment. Cale nodded eagerly. That's what I want. A chance to work together. To prove that even those who've been forgotten can still make a difference. As the discussion continued, cracks began to form among the Valeth crew. Mira seemed cautiously optimistic, intrigued by the idea of collaboration. Rin, however, remained skeptical, muttering under his breath about trusting outsiders. Despite their differences, Cale pressed on, determined to bridge the gap between two races scared by history. By the end of the meeting, Elise agreed to extend temporary aid, food, medical supplies, and access to her ship's engineers to repair the Orion. In return, the Valeth would assist in studying the terraforming equipment. It was a fragile alliance, built on mutual need rather than trust. But it was a start. Later, as Cale stared out of the cruiser's viewport at the barren moon below, he felt a surge of determination. This place, once a graveyard of failure, now held the promise of renewal. For the first time, he saw a path forward, not just for himself, but for all the Valeth. And though the road ahead would be difficult, he knew one thing for certain. Survival wasn't just about enduring hardship. It was about finding hope in the most unexpected places and holding on to it, no matter what. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The combined efforts of the Valeth and human crews transformed the barren moon into a hive of experimentation and innovation. Cale worked tirelessly alongside Captain Elise Vega, their differences in language and culture bridged by shared determination. Together, they pored over schematics, repaired broken machinery, and tested theories that had once seemed impossible. For the first time in years, the Valeth felt purpose beyond mere survival. Mira took charge of mapping the moon's surface, identifying areas where terraforming could have the greatest impact. Her precision and attention to detail impressed even the skeptical humans, earning her grudging respect from Elise's crew. Rin, though still distrustful, found himself drawn into the work when he discovered that some of the ancient machines used engineering principles similar to Valeth technology. His gruff demeanor softened slightly as he collaborated with one of the human engineers, a quiet woman named Jace, who shared his love for tinkering. Cale spent most of his time studying the musical device they'd recovered from the ruins. With Elise's help, they deciphered fragments of its programming, revealing not just melodies but encoded messages, poems, and stories left behind by the colony's inhabitants. These echoes of humanity's past fascinated Cale, offering glimpses of emotions he struggled to comprehend yet couldn't ignore. He began to see how art could inspire resilience, weaving connections between people across time and space. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting the moon in shades of crimson and gold, Cale approached Elise near the edge of their makeshift camp. She was gazing at the sky, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder," she asked without turning around, "if we're doing enough? If what we leave behind will matter?" Cale hesitated before answering. "I think about it all the time. My people, we've been so focused on surviving that we forgot how to live. But your ancestors, they didn't give up. Even when things looked hopeless, they kept creating, building, dreaming." Elise smiled faintly. "Dreams can be dangerous, you know. They make you vulnerable, but they also keep you going when everything else falls apart." Their conversation turned to the future. Elise explained that repairing the terraforming equipment wouldn't just revive the moon. It could serve as a symbol of hope for both their peoples. "Imagine what this place could become," she said, gesturing toward the desolate landscape. "A sanctuary. A reminder that even abandoned worlds can bloom again." Inspired by her vision, Cale proposed an idea. Instead of simply restoring the machines, why not enhance them using a blend of Valeth logic and human creativity? The Valeth excelled at efficiency and precision, while humans brought adaptability and imagination. By combining their strengths, They could create something greater than either race could achieve alone. Work intensified as the team embraced this new direction. Slowly but surely, life began to return to the moon. Dormant seeds stored in cryogenic pods sprouted under artificial sunlight, spreading patches of green across the gray soil. Water reservoirs refilled, fed by condensation systems powered by renewable energy. Even the air grew richer, carrying the faint scent of growing plants, a promise of renewal. But progress wasn't without challenges. Supplies dwindled faster than expected, forcing difficult decisions about resource allocation. Tensions flared occasionally, especially when Rin clashed with Jace over technical disagreements. Yet each conflict was resolved through compromise, reinforcing the fragile bond between the two groups. One night, as the crew gathered around a small fire fueled by biofuel, Kale played a melody from the musical device. Its haunting notes drifted through the cool air, silencing everyone. For a moment, there were no divisions, only shared awe at the beauty of creation. As the final note faded, Elis raised her cup in a toast. "To new beginnings," she said softly. "To hope," Kale added, his voice filled with quiet resolve. And in that moment, surrounded by stars and the hum of rebirth, the seeds of collaboration blossomed into something extraordinary. The moon was no longer just a relic of failure. It was becoming a testament to unity and the power of two abandoned races daring to dream together. Just as the moon began to show signs of life, shadows from the Valeth's past emerged to threaten everything they had built. One morning, as Kale and Elise reviewed progress reports in the command tent, an alarm blared across the camp. The sensors detected an incoming vessel, a warship far larger than the Orion or Elise's scout cruiser. Its trajectory was unmistakable. It was heading straight for the moon. Mira scrambled to identify the ship, her fingers flying over the controls. "It's Vorin," she said grimly, her voice cutting through the rising tension. "He's here." Vorin, a ruthless faction leader among the Valeth, had long opposed Cal's vision of cooperation with humans. To him, survival meant domination, not partnership. He saw the moon's resources as tools for power, not symbols of hope. And now he'd come to claim them. "He must have tracked us," Rin muttered, his usual sarcasm replaced by unease. "What do we do? Fight? Run?" Elise stepped forward, her expression hardening. "We don't run, and we don't let him destroy what we've worked so hard to build." Kale nodded, though his heart raced. "If we fight, we'll lose. His ship outguns us. But maybe we can reason with him." "Reason?" Jace scoffed, tightening the straps on her toolkit. "That guy doesn't listen to anyone but himself." Kale ignored the skepticism. Despite their differences, Vorin was still Valeth, and Kale believed there was still honor buried beneath his ambition. As the warship descended, kicking up clouds of dust, Kale stepped outside the camp alone, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. The massive vessel loomed above him, its weapons glinting menacingly in the dim light. A hatch opened, and Vorin appeared, flanked by armed guards. His silver skin gleamed like polished steel, and his piercing eyes locked onto Kale. "You dare defy me?" Vorin growled, his voice carrying the weight of authority and disdain. "This is Valeth territory. You've no right to share it with outsiders." "This isn't about rights," Kale replied calmly, meeting Vorin's gaze without flinching. "It's about survival. About giving our people a future instead of clinging to the failures of the past." Vorin sneered. "Survival means strength. These humans are weak. Look at them. They're parasites, leeching off scraps left by stronger species." Before Kale could respond, Elise stepped forward, her presence commanding. "Weak. Humans rebuilt entire planets after near extinction. We created art, science, and unity where others saw only chaos. Tell me, Vorin, what has your strength achieved besides division and fear?" For a moment, Vorin hesitated, his confidence wavering under Elise's sharp words. Sensing an opening, Kale pressed on. "This moon isn't just a resource. It's proof that we can work together. that even the abandoned can rise again. Don't take that away from our people. But Vorin wasn't swayed. With a dismissive wave, he ordered his guards to attack. Chaos erupted as laser fire lit up the darkened sky. The Vailith and human crews fought side by side, defending the fragile ecosystem they'd nurtured. Though outnumbered, their combined ingenuity turned the tide. Mira used the terrain to ambush Vorin's forces, while Rin rigged traps using salvaged parts. Even the music device played a role. Its rhythmic pulses disrupted enemy comms, creating confusion among Vorin's ranks. In the end, it was Kale who confronted Vorin directly. Cornered and furious, Vorin lunged at him, but Kale activated the musical device one last time. The haunting melody filled the air, resonating with something deep within Vorin. For the first time, he faltered, his expression softening as the notes stirred emotions he'd long suppressed. "You're wrong," Kale said quietly. "Strength isn't about taking. It's about building, about hope." Defeated, Vorin retreated, leaving behind a battered but intact moon, and a lesson neither side would soon forget. The battle may have been won, but the scars of distrust ran deep. Still, amidst the wreckage, Kale and Elise stood together, vowing to protect what they had created, for their peoples and for the future. The aftermath of the battle left the moon scared but alive. The fragile ecosystem they had fought so hard to nurture was damaged, but not destroyed. Burn marks marred the newly green patches of soil, and several machines lay wrecked from Vorin's assault. Yet, amidst the destruction, there was a strange sense of triumph. The Vailith and humans had stood side by side against overwhelming odds, and won. Kale surveyed the damage with a mix of exhaustion and resolve. His hands were blistered from repairing equipment during the fight, and his mind was heavy with thoughts of what might have been lost. But as he walked through the camp, he saw something remarkable: unity. Humans and Vailith worked together to clean up debris, tend to the wounded, and salvage what remained of their shared project. For the first time, Kale felt that the two races weren't just allies, they were becoming family. Elise joined him near the edge of the terraformed zone, where a cluster of young plants still clung stubbornly to life despite the chaos. "It's incredible," she said softly, crouching to examine one of the sprouts. "Even after all this, it's still growing." "Life finds a way," Kale replied, echoing words she'd once told him. "But it's not just about survival anymore. It's about creating something worth living for." Elise nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "You're right. This moon isn't just a resource or a refuge. It's a chance to show others, Vailith, humans, everyone, that even abandoned worlds can be reborn. That cooperation is stronger than division." Inspired by her words, Kale proposed an ambitious plan: to transform the moon into a shared sanctuary, a place where both Vailith and humans could coexist and rebuild together. He envisioned blending their cultures, not just technology, but art, philosophy, and tradition. The musical device they discovered would serve as the cornerstone of this vision, its melodies symbolizing harmony between logic and emotion, strength and creativity. At first, skepticism lingered among the crew. Rin voiced concerns about whether such a partnership could truly work. "Humans and Vailith are too different," he argued. "What happens when things go wrong? When old grudges resurface?" Mira countered gently, "Maybe being different is the point. We don't have to be the same to help each other. Look at how far we've come already." Jace added, "And if it doesn't work, at least we tried. Isn't that better than giving up before we even start?" With Elise's support, Kale drafted plans for the sanctuary. They would expand the terraforming efforts, using hybrid systems that combined human adaptability with Vailith precision. Artifacts from the ruins would be preserved in a museum-like structure, celebrating humanity's resilience while honoring the Vailith's history. Even Vorin's attack became part of the narrative, a reminder of challenges overcome through unity. As construction began, the crew noticed subtle changes in their interactions. Mira started teaching some of the humans' basic Vailith phrases, while Jace introduced the Vailith to Earth's storytelling traditions. Songs played regularly throughout the camp, blending ancient human melodies with new compositions inspired by the musical device. These small acts of sharing fostered trust and understanding, weaving bonds that felt unbreakable. One evening, under a sky painted with stars, Kale gathered everyone around a bonfire fueled by biofuel. In the flickering light, he addressed the group, his voice filled with quiet determination. This moon was once a graveyard. Now it's becoming a home. Not just for us, but for anyone who needs hope. Let's make sure it stays that way, for our children and theirs. Applause broke out, followed by laughter and song. As the music swelled, carrying notes of joy and defiance, Kale realized this wasn't just a sanctuary, it was a symphony. A testament to the power of collaboration, resilience, and dreams. And though the galaxy might never fully understand what had happened here, those who called this place home would carry its legacy forward, proving that even in the darkest corners of the universe, light could bloom again. Years passed, and the moon, now named Synthara, transformed into a thriving sanctuary. What had once been barren rock was now a lush expanse of green valleys, shimmering lakes, and towering forests. The air carried the scent of blooming flowers, and birds native to Earth soared alongside avian-like creatures brought by the Velith. It was a testament to what two abandoned races could achieve when they worked together. Kale and Elise stood on a hill overlooking the colony, their faces weathered by time, but glowing with pride. The scars of battles long past had faded, replaced by signs of unity. Humans and Velith lived side by side, their differences no longer barriers but strengths. Children played in the fields, speaking a hybrid language that blended galactic standard with Velith tones. Artisans crafted sculptures and murals celebrating both cultures, while engineers collaborated on projects that pushed the boundaries of innovation. But Synthara wasn't just a home, it was a beacon. Word of its success spread across the galaxy, drawing attention from species who had dismissed the Velith as relics and humans as upstarts. Diplomatic envoys arrived regularly, eager to learn how this unlikely partnership had succeeded where so many others had failed. Some came out of curiosity, others saw alliances or trade opportunities. A few even viewed Synthara with suspicion, fearing its example might inspire rebellion among oppressed peoples. Kale and Elise traveled frequently to neighboring systems, sharing their story and inviting participation. They spoke at galactic councils, addressing crowds of diplomats and leaders who listened with a mix of awe and unease. Synthara isn't perfect, Kale admitted during one such speech. We argue, we make mistakes, and we struggle. But we've learned that survival isn't about strength or dominance. It's about connection, about finding common ground. Elise added, her voice steady and impassioned. The galaxy doesn't have to be divided. We can build bridges instead of walls. Together, we're stronger than any empire, more resilient than any army. Their words resonated deeply, sparking movements for change across the stars. On distant planets, marginalized groups began organizing, inspired by Synthara's example. Trade routes opened between isolated colonies, fostering economic growth and cultural exchange. Even rival factions paused their conflicts to observe the ripple effect of cooperation. Back on Synthara, life continued to flourish. The musical device that had first sparked Kal's curiosity became the heart of the colony's culture. Its melodies were woven into daily rituals, celebrations, and ceremonies. Artists created new compositions inspired by its rhythms, blending them with traditional songs from both Earth and Jalor. The music served as a reminder of where they'd come from and where they were going. Yet challenges remained. Not everyone welcomed Synthara's influence. Powerful empires saw it as a threat to their control, spreading propaganda that painted the colony as naive idealists playing with fire. Vorin, though defeated years ago, still whispered dissent among rogue Velith factions, warning that collaboration would weaken their race. Despite these threats, Kale and Elise refused to give up. They knew progress wasn't linear. It required constant effort and vigilance. Together, They strengthened Synthera's defenses, trained new generations in diplomacy and leadership, and expanded outreach programs to include more species. One evening, as they watched the twin suns set over Synthera's horizon, Kale turned to Elise with a smile. "Do you remember when we thought this place was impossible?" She chuckled softly. "I remember thinking you were crazy. But look at us now." They stood in silence for a moment, taking in the beauty of their creation. Synthera wasn't just a colony. It was proof that even in a fractured universe, hope could take root and grow. And as long as there were people willing to nurture it, the seeds of unity would continue to spread, bridging divides and lighting the way forward. For Kale and Elise, the journey wasn't over. It never truly would be. But every step they took brought them closer to a future where no one would be abandoned, not by their own kind, nor by the galaxy itself. Decades had passed since Kale and Elise first set foot on the moon that would become Synthera. The once barren world was now a thriving tapestry of life, culture, and innovation, a living testament to the power of unity. Kale, now an elder with silver hair streaked faintly blue, walked slowly through the bustling streets of the colony's central hub. Children darted past him, laughing as they chased after mechanical birds designed by Violet engineers. Nearby, human musicians played instruments crafted from materials native to both Earth and Jolor, their melodies blending seamlessly with the hum of nearby machinery. Elise stood beside him, her own hair touched with gray, but her eyes still sharp and full of determination. Together, they watched as a new generation took up the mantle of leadership, proving that Synthera's legacy would endure far beyond their lifetimes. "Do you ever wonder if we did enough?" she asked softly, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. Kale smiled, leaning on his cane. "Enough? Look around you, Elise. We gave them a future. That's more than most can say." The colony had grown beyond its founders' wildest dreams. It wasn't just a refuge for humans and Violet anymore. It had become a haven for countless other species seeking peace and renewal. Refugees from war-torn planets found solace here, while scholars and artists flocked to study Synthera's unique blend of logic and creativity. Even former enemies, like Voron's followers, had begun to trickle in, drawn by stories of forgiveness and collaboration. But perhaps the greatest symbol of Synthera's success was its music. The ancient device that had guided Kale so many years ago had been restored and placed at the center of the colony's grand amphitheater. Every evening, it broadcast a symphony composed collaboratively by Violet and human musicians, a piece that celebrated resilience, diversity, and hope. Its notes carried across the galaxy via long-range transmitters, reaching corners of space where despair still lingered. One such transmission caught the attention of a distant fleet of explorers stranded on a dying planet. As they listened to the haunting yet uplifting melody, tears streamed down their faces. For the first time in years, they felt something they thought they'd lost forever: hope. Inspired, they charted a course for Synthera, determined to seek refuge and perhaps a new beginning. Back on Synthera, Kale and Elise prepared for one final journey. Knowing their time was limited, they decided to travel aboard the Orion, now fully restored and upgraded, to visit neighboring systems and share their story one last time. Their departure was bittersweet. The colony they had built was strong enough to thrive without them, but saying goodbye was never easy. As the ship launched into orbit, Kale looked out at Synthera one last time. Its green valleys glowed under the light of twin suns, and its people waved farewell from below. "It's beautiful," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "It's alive," Elise replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. "And it will keep growing, long after we're gone." Their final tour spanned months, taking them to planets ravaged by conflict and poverty. Everywhere they went, they spoke of Synthera, not as a utopia, but as proof that even broken worlds could heal when nurtured by compassion and cooperation. By the time they returned home, Kale and Elise were frail but content, knowing they had left an indelible mark on the galaxy. When Kale finally passed away, surrounded by loved ones beneath the stars he had come to love, Synthera honored him in a way no words could capture. That night, the entire colony gathered in the amphitheater, and the symphony played louder than ever before. Its notes soared into the cosmos, carrying Cal's dream of unity to every corner of the universe. And somewhere, in the silent expanse of space, another abandoned race heard the music and dared to hope.